It was miserable, and that went on for weeks. I don't even know how many weeks, but maybe like 7, 8 weeks. And then one day, I woke up and something was really wrong. I had a conference call with my cardiologist because he wanted to check up because he was wondering why I hadn't filled any of my, refilled my prescriptions because they should have ran out by now. Why I hadn't done that. And I said, well, here's what I've been doing. And I'm down 205 pounds. And I told him all this stuff. And I thought he was going to be elated and want me to come down and tell him about it. And maybe he could put other people on. And after all that, he goes, I'm worried about your diet.
Todd, how did you find carnivore?
Well, let's see. I've been fighting weight my whole life. When I was a kid, I was a big kid. I was the last of 6 kids, and I noticed I was a lot heavier than all the other kids in my family. We all got bigger as mom seemed to have it, which later I found out lined up with what Jason Fung said about insulin resistant infants. I think that actually I'll come back to that later, but that was a interesting thing that happened because the more kids my mom had and the worse her diet was, the bigger we got. So I was I was pretty insulin resistant when I was a kid. Like I was, 380 pounds roughly when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I just kept going. When I was 14 years old, I was 600 pounds. And then that was when I really, believe it or not, tried to put the brakes on. And I started dieting when I was 14 years old. I'm like, something's gotta stop here. So I was pretty much in a perpetual diet from the time I was 14 till I was 39 when I found uh, carnivore. And so I'd been on a million calorie restrictive diets. I'd seen dietitians. I'd went to doctors, and they kept wanting me to get bariatric surgery. They kept, wanting me to get gastric bypass, and then they wanted me to get lap band, and then they wanted me to get gastric sleeve, and they kept going down that road. But my mom had gotten gastric bypass, and my sister got gastric sleeve, and I watched it fail for both of them, and they both gained it back. So I didn't believe that was right. And I was always stubborn. I was a electrician, and I was working in the field in construction when I was 14, 15, 16, and on. And it wasn't easy as carrying around this heavy body, but by getting to work and get moving, I would usually get about 100 pounds off me, 110 pounds. And I'd float between, once I got moving, I was floating between 490 and like 540 most of the time when I was a teenager. And I was working with that. And then I would just get fed up, because I always had really bad depression, anxiety that I was dealing with, and suicidal depression. Like it was just really dark place. I was always fighting that. So I'd go on extreme diets because the diets, the calorie restrictive diets and the meal plans and all that stuff would never work. So finally, I'd just stop eating and do something really extreme. And twice in my life, I'd lost 300 pounds and then gained it back again. And twice in my life, I lost 200 pounds and gained it back again. And so I made 4 really good shots at this between my 20s and my about 39 to try to get this weight off, and it would always just creep back on. And then when I was, um, well, I'm trying to think. I think I was 29 or 30. I got a promotion, got put in the office, and I wasn't out in the field as much. So then I was more sedentary. It was even harder to keep the weight off. So it started coming back on. And then pretty much everything took a turn in 2016. My dad was dying. He had leukemia, and he couldn't. He'd been fighting type 2 diabetes and kidney failure, and then he got diagnosed with leukemia. He couldn't take the chemo pills because of the kidney failure. His kidneys couldn't handle it, so he was dying. And right then, we were working in North Dakota in the Bakken oil boom, and my brother, we were all down there, and we all got a nasty cold virus, a real bad virus that was going down there. And the whole crew got it. It was a really bad one, really really rough in the lungs. And my brother Ty went to the urgent care when he's down there. And they checked him out and they gave him some prescription medicine. And then I waited till I got home that weekend and I went to my doctor and I told him my brother's taking prednisone, so I guess I need some of that for this cold. My doctor said, "Oh, your brother must not have the same thing you got." And I said, "Oh, he for sure does. Our whole crew got this." He goes, "Well, your brother shouldn't be on prednisone. That'll kill him." And I said, "Well, why is that going to hurt him?" And he said, "Well, that's a steroid, and if he has an active cold virus like you have, it'll knock out his immune system, and it'll cause an infection, and it'll kill him." And I said, "Oh, well, I said, I'm sure he's got what I have, and I'm sure that's what he's taking." And he goes, "Well, you better tell him to stop taking it." And I said, "All right." And he gave me a prescription for antibiotics. And I went home that day and I told my brother Ty, I said, "Hey, I just talked to my doctor. He said not to take that medicine. He said that's a risk for you." And he goes, "Well, I don't feel good. I'm going to go down and see if I can't get what you got." So he went down to the urgent care. And when he got to the urgent care said, "You're having a heart attack." And so they flew him to the hospital, and the hospital airlifted him to Salt Lake City, and he ended up having 13 heart attacks. And they had to revive him 13 times on the way at 38 years old. And they it ended up ruining his heart at 38 years old. And they had to give him a pacemaker and a defibrillator right there. And he couldn't sit up after that. He ended up in a nursing home waiting on a heart transplant. And it's exactly like my doctor said. They'd given him the wrong medicine and it had turned into a lung infection because they knocked out his immune system. That lung infection spread to his heart. It killed the nerves on top of his heart, and he ended up with 13 heart attacks. It damaged his heart. So he had to be on a heart transplant list, and his heart was so weak that he couldn't even sit up. It wouldn't pump blood to his brain if he was sitting up, so he had to stay on his back. And so they kept him in a nursing home for about a year and a half waiting to get on a heart transplant list. And one day he just didn't wake up. He passed away from it just before 40. So, and then 11 days later, dad passed. He was just hanging on to see if Ty was going to get a heart. So dad passed 11 days later. And right in there, my wife left. And so my wife left me right in there because of the stress. And I was a stress ball and my health was bad. And so all that happened in 2016. And well, the Ty had the first heart attacks in 2016. He didn't die until 2017. And that was when dad passed away. But it was bad year, high stress. I had gotten sick and was in the ICU again from lung issues, and I was super stressed out. And so, long story short, I'd kind of just planned on either I was gonna finally succumb to the depression and just check out, or I was gonna fight again. And through a long struggle, I decided to give dieting one more shot, and I said, "I'm gonna," I was listening to Jordan Peterson right then, and that was kind of my lifeline was Jordan Peterson. And he was talking about, if you want to say a prayer that'll get answered, sit on the edge of your bed and pray about what's incredibly stupid thing that you're doing right now that you could change and maintain that would actually make a difference. And he said, if you do that, it'll come to you. It'll be the thing that you don't want to do, but it'll be the thing that you need to do and it'll come to you. And so I was doing that, and I knew that I didn't know what to do, but I did know that I was drinking a lot of soda at the time. And I was like, that's an obvious thing that I can get rid of. I know it's not helping. So I changed the soda to diet soda. That's baby steps. So I got off the sugar. And then I did that for 6 months. And then I was like, well, what kind of diet could I get on that might be sustainable? And I, my brother was lifting weights at the time. And so he said, how about you do a weightlifter's diet, which was high protein, low fat, moderate carbohydrates. And so I got on that diet, and let me tell you, that was the most miserable diet and the worst diet I've ever been on for depression and like suicidal depression. That thing had me so depressed. Like I had no energy. I felt terrible all the time. it was the worst diet. I was just eating dry chicken breast, and I was eating like brown rice and a little bit of no fat yogurt. And I mean, I hated that diet so bad. But I did it for 14 months, and I was the most depressed I'd ever been. And I only lost 37 pounds. I lost 37 pounds on that diet in 14 months. And I was so miserable. I mean, I was peeling myself out of bed. I was just walking darkness of depression. I hated that diet so much. And I knew that I was about to fall off that diet. And I was like, I can't keep this up any longer. I was like, how can I make this sustainable? I need to make this chicken, how do you make chicken breast not dry and tasteless is what I was thinking, because I wasn't using any seasonings or sauces. And I looked up a channel online called Sous Vide Everything, Guga Foods, and because it showed how to sous vide meat so that it would stay juicy and tender and all this stuff. And so I watched this thing and I ordered a sous vide machine. While I was waiting for it, I watched Guga Foods and they were sous vide ribeyes and picanhas over and over and over again and then searing them in butter. And they looked so good. And I was so hungry from eating 14 months of no fat. They just looked delicious. And so when my sous vide machine got here, I was like, before I go to back to the chicken, I'm going to get one ribeye and I'm going to sous vide it. I'm going to sear it in butter and I'm going to eat it. Well, I went and I ordered ribeyes from Costco, but I got a pack of 4. And so it was pretty funny because I'd said 1, but they came in a pack of 4. And so I ran the macros because back then I was tracking and I was like, well, if I cut out the rice and the carbohydrates and replace it with the fat, I'm actually not that far off. I could have 1 ribeye a day with butter and it would be the same as all the macros, at least in calories, as I was eating before. So for 4 days, I had 1 ribeye seared in butter, and that was all I ate, and it tasted fantastic. But what was crazy was I was so happy. My brain turned on when I had those ribeyes, and I could think clearly, and I didn't want to eat a bullet for the first time in months. And I just had this energy, and I felt so much better. And I kid you not, in that 4 days, the depression seemed to have lifted by 50%. I was awake. I wasn't miserable. My mind was awake. I felt joy for the first time in months. And I got on the scale and I lost 11 pounds in that 4 days. And I'm sure it was all fluid, but I just went through 14 months of hell to lose 37 pounds. And then I just went and ate delicious ribeye and butter and I lost 11 pounds in 4 days. And I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea. I'd never even heard of keto before this. So I was so much happier. I felt so good. I went and Googled it. I'm like, why am I losing weight on ribeye and butter? What is going on? Why do I feel better? And a guy named Dr. Darren Schmidt out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, YouTube video pulled up, and he was first one I heard talk about keto, which is bittersweet because that put me on a path of about 2.5 years of roller coaster keto diet because I got into keto and then I found out, hey, do you know that you can make all the addictive things that you're hooked to but in keto and then they're healthy for you? And so I went through 2.5 years of, swerve and stevia and monk fruit and, almond flour and all this stupid crap and trying to make all this junk. And all that it did was make me almost obsessed with food because now all I did was think about how can I take this drug that I'm addicted to and make it keto healthy and make a faux copy of it. And it just went up and down. And I did feel a little bit better, but I mean, it was too hard. I was still a carb addict. When I was on keto, I was still 100% of food and carb addict. And so I fell off the wagon like 4 or 5 times in that 2 years for a week or 2 at a time, and then I get back on, and it was just this roller coaster of keto nonsense. And then 2021 hit? I think the end of 2021 hit, and things had progressed. I was working from home. I was over 600 pounds. It's probably 640 pounds, 650 pounds at the time. I just was full of inflammation and fluid, and I had fallen off the wagon on keto. And I decided I'm going to jumpstart this. At this point, I was studying Jason Fung stuff because I'd kind of narrowed this down to really bad insulin resistance, and I really believe in your fasted insulin set point, you know. So I'm like, all right, fasting. Fasting is where this is going to be at to lower that fasted insulin set point. So me being compulsive like I was and always trying to do something big to get this over quickly, I decided I was going to do a 40-day fast. And I made it to day 21. And on day 21, I started having an asthma attack. And I didn't understand why, but I couldn't breathe. My lungs were tightening up and I didn't understand what was going on. And then I started drinking some stuff. And then I just was like, I don't know if this is from fasting or not having carbs or food. So I think I had a juice or something. Started to help it a little bit. And what I found out eventually was I ended up having to go to the hospital, and I had such low potassium that it had screwed up my blood plasma, and your blood plasma won't hold red blood cells when you don't have enough potassium. So I had a low red blood cell count, which is why I couldn't move oxygen, which is why my lungs were tightening up, and I was having basically an asthma attack from no red blood or from low red blood cells. So that happened, and so I was a little bummed out. But about this time, I had heard, because I was such a Jordan Peterson fan, I was listening about the lion diet, you know, and I was like, okay. So this was in the back of my head, a place that I was going to go. And when I got back from the hospital, um, I had caught COVID in the hospital, and so did a friend of mine who I worked with, who was the same age as me, got COVID, and he was way healthier than me, and he had gotten it a week before I did, and he went in and they put him on the drugs and the ventilator, and he died. He died at 38 while I was going through that. So I was like, I can't go into the hospital. I won't make it. So I stayed home, and my sister and family did kind of a home remedy with the ivermectin and everything, and I did survive it, obviously, but I got pretty beat up. I had a fever for 13 days of over 103. I was coughing up blood clots that were looked like bronchial tubes. It was terrible. I was real sick. And once I came through the other side of that, I had made it, but I got really, really sick. And I had put on 84 pounds of fluid. And so I just swelled up and I didn't know where it came from. But in 3 weeks, I put on 84 pounds of fluid. And little did I know what had happened was my lungs got scarred up from the COVID, from the pneumonia that I'd had, and my heart. I had ended up with congestive heart failure after that, and I couldn't breathe. Uh, so I was going back and forth, and I was trying to do keto, and I was thinking about going lion, but I was also taking some different herbs and stuff at the time to treat the COVID stuff, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I kept stopping breathing when I was sleeping. I was sleeping in a recliner. I couldn't lay down because I'd stopped breathing. And I was propped up and sleeping in a recliner. And I was at this point over 700 pounds with all that fluid on me. And my oxygen saturation was in the like mid 70s to even low 70 percentile. And my resting heart rate was like 107 to 120 beats a minute, just sitting in a chair. And everything was going haywire. And I'd fall asleep for an hour and I'd wake up gasping for air because I was stopped breathing when I was sleeping and I wasn't sure what to do. But I was slowly taking these herbs and trying to get fluid off me, but I couldn't stand for 90 seconds at a time. You know, it was pretty miserable. It was everything I could do to get to the bathroom once a day. It was miserable. And that went on for weeks. I don't even know how many weeks, but maybe like 7, 8 weeks. And then one day I woke up and something was really wrong. I had I was confused. I didn't know I had a splitting headache and I was disoriented and I was confused, didn't know what day it was, didn't know, I was kind of at work this whole time because I was working from home on my computer and I had a desk that I'd pull over to my recliner and I'd work from there. But I couldn't even remember if I was supposed to be at work. I couldn't remember what day it was, what was going on. I checked. I had a pulse ox that I put on my finger, and I put it on there. My pulse ox came back at 53% saturation. And I was super confused, and something was really wrong. And I had this really like gloomy, doomy feeling, like something was like there was just a pending doom, and I didn't know what it was coming from, but something was seriously wrong. So I called my sister, and I was like, I couldn't speak very well. I couldn't string together words, and it took a long time to get it over. She came over, and then she just called an ambulance, and the ambulance came. And of course, it's not fun when you're 700 pounds to even get in an ambulance or get out of the house. And so that was a trick. And got in the ambulance, went to the hospital. And that was when I got all the news. They said they believed what happened was that I had had a mini stroke, but they weren't sure because I was too big to get into an MRI. And they said they needed to do an MRI to tell me for certain if I had a stroke. And they said, besides which, it's kind of the least of your problems right now because you are having congestive heart failure. We got to get this fluid off you. We got to get you breathing. We got to get you on oxygen. So I spent 11 days in the hospital. They got like 60 or 70 pounds of fluid off me in that 11 days. And they put me on oxygen. They put me on a list of, I had to go to, well, they put me on a bunch of new medicines. I don't even remember what they were, but they put me on a bunch of new medications. They set me up with a bunch of new specialists and all this stuff. And then they sent me home 11 days later with a laundry list of new specialists I was going to have to go see and medicines that I had to take. And and then they set me up with home oxygen and a CPAP. Started doing that. And so anyhow, I just got home. I was pretty depressed, and I started thinking about it all. And I'm like, how am I going to get to all these appointments being this heavy? It was super degrading and terrible to get out of the house once. I don't want to do this several times a month. And then I got to looking at all these medications I was supposed to take. And I just watched my dad and my brother do that. And all it did was kill them. They never got better off of it. They would take more drugs, go to more appointments, come back with new drugs, more drugs, take more drugs, get a little sicker, go to more appointments, get more drugs, take more drugs, and then die, you know? And I was seeing that. And literally that day, the very next day when I got back from the hospital, I just looked at my little bag of drugs that they'd given me, plus the ones that I was already taking, and I just threw them all in the garbage. I'm like, I'm gonna do lion, and I'm gonna pray, and I'm either gonna make it out of this thing or I'm gonna go see Dad and Ty, and I don't care which. But I'm not gonna do this hospital drug stupid thing where we just die slowly. I'm just not doing it. And I never did. I gave it up, and that was what saved my life, to be honest with you. It was the exact thing that saved my life. Because I went carnivore. Now, I didn't totally understand. I didn't totally go lion. I went lion plus eggs. But for the first 5 weeks, I decided I was going to use bacon too to get me through the hump and then try to get to lion. And what I ended up doing through that, because after I was researching lion, but then I found carnivore through lion and BBB and E. I really ended up doing BBB and E. But fast forward 6 months, I was free from all carb addiction for the first time. I was off oxygen, home oxygen. I was off CPAP, hadn't taken any medication. I was 200 pounds, 205 pounds lighter in 6 months. And my resting heart rate went from 107 beats a minute to 68 beats a minute. And my oxygen saturation went from 88% on 6 liters of oxygen to 96% with no oxygen. And I could walk again. I could move again. I had color. I could think. And I could finally speak clearly again and put together sentences. And then I had a conference call with my cardiologist because he wanted to check up because he was wondering why I hadn't filled any of my, refilled my prescriptions because they should have ran out by now. Why I hadn't done that. And I said, well, here's what I've been doing. And I'm down 205 pounds. And I told him all this stuff. And I thought he was going to be elated and want me to come down and tell him about it. And maybe he could put other people on. And after all that, he goes, I'm worried about your diet. That was the only thing he had to say. And I said, I'm worried about your mental health, doc. I think you need a doctor because I think your mental health's wrong. I said, did you hear what I just told you? All these things that you told me I was going to have for forever are gone. I'm not having any of those symptoms. And I did it without any of the medication. And I dropped 205 pounds. And you told me I was going to be on oxygen forever. It's only been 6 months and I'm not on oxygen at all anymore. And my oxygen saturation's back. Did you hear what I said? And he said, well, yes, I heard what you said, and that's all great. But do you understand how bad, red meat and how, how bad this is for your cholesterol? And you already have heart problems. And I mean, when I was in the ICU for 11 days, nobody asked me what my diet was even like. Nobody considered my diet. And 6 months later, I am a new human being. Now my diet's a problem. So, yeah, that's pretty much what started all this. That's why I started a YouTube channel. I'm like, okay, I got some shit to say now. Yeah.
Wow. And so that conversation was when?
Oh, let's see. Let's see. That would have been right about, that would have been March of 2023, I believe. 23, 24. Yeah, 20 March, or April of 2023. Yeah.
Right. And so what's happened in the meantime? Like the weights just continue to come off
Yeah.
and
Well,
more improvements?
yeah. Well, then I made a YouTube channel because I found out about Bill Knott during this time and Homestead House channel. And I felt for Bill Knott because I was 700 pounds. I was looking for another person that had lost that much weight on carnivore or had done it and been successful. When I was looking, I didn't see anybody my size that had done it. And I know it sounds stupid because there's people that are 400 and 500 pounds that were having success. But in my addictive little brain, I was like, well, they're not 700. So, you make excuses somehow. Your brain lies to you, plays games with you. So I was throwing a Hail Mary at this thing, but I didn't actually expect it to work. I thought I was going to die for sure. But it was the last hope, and I tried everything else, so I just did it. Well, after it worked and exceeded all, anything that I could even hope for by 10 times, then I saw Bill and I was like, Bill needs to know that this works, that there's somebody out here that did it, because I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. And I know what it's like to feel like you can't, get excited about something. Like when you spend your whole life dieting, you don't even want to tell anybody you're on a diet because you always look like such a fool because they never work out. And so you get all excited about doing something and then it's just another failure. And you get all excited about doing something and it's another failure. And pretty soon in your circle, you become that guy that, is always trying something crazy, but, is a fool, they all think, And so I just wanted to let him know. I said, like, it's okay to really lean into this one because this isn't a diet. This is kind of a miracle, you know? And so I started a YouTube channel just to get that out there. So my first video, I was telling my story a little bit, and I did that so I could make a second video, and it was a message to Bill Knott. So hopefully, because I didn't know how to get a hold of him, and I just wanted him to see it. And when I put that out there, Bill didn't get a hold of me, but Limitless Lindy did. And she was like, I've lost, at the time, she'd lost over 400 pounds. And I'm like, holy cow, I thought I was the only one out here like this. So me and Lindy kind of contacted and we had a conversation, and it was really nice to talk to somebody who had been in your shoes. And we were talking about, things that only people, that are really heavy could relate to. And as we were talking, we were thinking, I wonder how many more people are stuck like we are that are not getting help because they think like we think, and they were kind of in the shadows like we were, and couldn't get help. So we were like, maybe we should start doing a live stream, and we'll just talk like we're doing right now, but we'll do it live, and anybody that's in our situation, that'll resonate with them because we'll be speaking about things only we know, and that should resonate with them. and it should pull him in. And we did that. And on our second week, we found Michael. Michael contacted us, and he'd been housebound for over 20 years. He hadn't been out of the house in over 20 years. And he found us, and he's been with us ever since in the show. That's been almost 14 months now. He's down about 168 pounds. And we're hoping that next year, he thinks he has a bigger problem because he's got some really serious lymphedema. He's got like an 80-pound lymphedema mass on his leg that's really holding him down. But I think in 2026 we'll finally get him out of his house for the first time in like 22 years. So yeah, but we did that, and then Lindy took me over to SPG, which was good because I kind of stalled out after that first 200 pounds. You know, the first like 120 pounds was fluid because I'd put on so much fluid from being sick and whatever, and then I'd gotten off a fair amount of fat. But the fluid, it drives me nuts when people are like, that was just fluid. It doesn't matter. I'm like, I don't care. Do you know how good it feels to get rid of 120 pounds of fluid? Do you have any idea how much better that feels? You know? So I knew it was a lot of fluid, but then I started going back to my old calorie restricting brain, and I was like, well, carnivore and less is more. So I started eating under a pound of meat a day, and doing OMADs, and then I was down to 1,400 calories a day, and I stalled. My depression started coming back a little bit, and Lindy was like, "You got to come over to the Steak and Butter Gang and try this priming. Everybody's having a lot of success with it." And sure enough, that's exactly what it took because I went over there, started priming, and I found out what it was like to heal my metabolism and actually have a functioning metabolism for the first time in my life. And yeah, and then it just kept coming off and putting muscle on. I built a gym. I lift weights now. I get up at 3:30 in the morning and lift weights now and feel fantastic. And I'm down about a total of 320 pounds from the start, but I think I've actually put on 40 or 50 pounds of muscle since then too. So there's been a huge composition change. So
That's phenomenal. That's awesome.
yeah.
Um, just to take a step back, because I wrote a note down for myself. I just 380 pounds at 7 or 8 years old.
Hmm. Yeah.
At that age, like, were you aware that, like, this was a problem? Like you weren't, for example, maybe as mobile or whatever as other kids?
Well, see, that's the thing, right? Like I definitely was struggling, but my dad is a Marine, and we were homeschooled, and he kept us moving. I wasn't as active as I should have been, and I should have had more energy, but I just definitely stayed moving. And my dad and my brothers knew that if I slowed down, it was going to be really bad for me. So they kept me hopping. And I had older brothers that I had to try to keep up with. You didn't want to be ridiculed by your brothers for being a sissy or whatever. So you just sucked it up, and I kept moving, and I worked. And so what I ended up doing is it was hard. It was hard on my joints. It was hard on my back. It was painful, but I kept moving, and it just ended up, I was stout. I was pretty strong. Like, let me see if I can find a picture. Like I have, like most people don't think that I weigh what I weigh when I weigh it, because I actually think I have a fair amount of body mass and bone structure because I had it my whole life. I didn't have a normal frame, get to be like 25 and then put on a bunch of weight. Like I was putting it on through my developing stages. So I got very strong. Like I have a hernia right now because I did something stupid at work, but I flipped over an 1,150-pound roll of wire by myself. Like I could move mountains. I was super stout. So that helped me carry the weight, but you still can't outrun it because, now my knees are in rough shape. I'm hoping carnivore can heal my knees. That's the thing that's still bothering me. And I also had a lot of lymphatic damage from the whole deal, lymphedema, but that seems to actually be healing up pretty well in consideration. I remember this shirt because I bought it for Christmas, and it was the biggest shirt I could get at Crow West. And this was me at 8, and I was about 370, 380 pounds here.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're about 8 years old there.
Yeah, it was 1991. I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And let's see. Let me see if I can find. I'll put this collage up here too. So what's funny is this is me when I was over 700 pounds and I was on oxygen. I was stuck in that chair.
Mm,
And then this is me here. And I was only 500 pounds in this picture, but most people don't think I look 500 pounds in this picture, you know? And that's why I took this. This was at my dad's funeral. I remember I was 600, like 56 pounds here in this picture here. And
right.
this was when I finally started losing weight on carnivore and I got down to 647 pounds and I could stand up long enough without oxygen to take a picture again. And that's when I started taking it there.
Right.
So, and now I'm about 100. Let's see, I'm about 110 pounds lighter than this picture, but I also had quite a bit of muscle composition right now. I got to take some updated pictures.
So, like, in that time, I'll just remove that from the screen. In that time, um, like, to now, just doing normal day-to-day things, getting in a car,
Yep,
going for a walk, like,
incredible.
standing up, looking for the remote or something for the TV, whatever it is, like, it's just must be so much easier.
Oh, it's incredibly easier. It is so crazy, like playing with the dog, reaching down and getting a dog toy for the dog, just getting stuff off the floor all of a sudden is not off limits, right? Like, 2 years ago, if it was on the floor, it may as well have fallen in a black hole in the depths of hell. I was not getting it again. That was out of bounds. Like that, I was buying a new one. It's staying right where it's at, you know? And then I'd lost my driver's license because I couldn't go to the DMV to get it to renew my license. So I hadn't driven in over 2.5 years. And so I got to go get my license back. And then shoot, it'd only been a year and a half. I came from that picture of death warmed over. And a year and a half later, I was on a plane going to Hack Your Health in Austin with the SBG gang. It was nuts. It was so nuts. I was like,
I mean, yeah, like, when you were 600, 700 pounds, like, taking a flight would have been just out of the question, or it would have been just really, really
miserable.
difficult?
I'd taken a couple of flights when I was that big. In fact, I have one of Lindy loves my flight story of when I was 600 pounds on a flight, but it was miserable. And I could get on there, but it took two seatbelt extensions, right? I had to get two seatbelt extensions to go around me. I'd always get in the aisle and then I would lean all the way out in the aisle as far as I could to not crush whoever was sitting next to me. And then every time the drink cart would come by, it would bump me. And while Lindy likes the story, it was funny because when when you're that big and you're walking down the aisles and you're looking for your seat, the panic you see on everybody's face that's watching you walk down the aisle because they know what you're looking for and they're praying to every god, their god that Jesus don't let him be sitting next to me, and they're watching it. And when you slow down, you got to give somebody the bad news. And so I remember I was flying into Chicago and I was walking down the aisle. I was looking for my seat, and there I am turning sideways and just kind of sumbering down, you know. And I finally find my seat, and it's next to this woman, and she looks up at me, and like if she wouldn't have been so mean about it, I would actually felt bad for her. But because she was so mean, I didn't mind like torturing her after this. Like it was a little bit fun to torture her because I kid you not, and I'm going to censor it for YouTube, but she looked up at me and she goes, F. That was all she said as soon as she saw me. And as soon as she said that, that was actually, she doesn't know it, but it was the kindest thing she could have actually said. Because if she wouldn't have said anything, I would have been feeling terrible for the whole time and would have felt guilty. But because of that, and now I had a mean streak in me, and now I'm like, all right. So I plopped down and I was like, where are you going? And I just started talking to her. But what was so funny was when I was sitting on this plane, the plane seats, they go back, right? They'll recline a little bit. Well, I didn't know it, but this one, the recline button, I was on Delta, and the recline button was on the inside of the arm rail, right on this right hand arm rail. Well, I was all squeezed in here, so my leg was hitting that. So when I was sitting in that whole thing, and I mean, I am squished in there like somebody's trying to press coal into diamonds in this chair, and I'm just stuck in here. Well, when the plane goes to take off and hits max thrust there, my leg hits that button and my seat goes back, and I'm looking at the bottom of this dude's beard behind me because now I'm in this dude's lap looking up, and I'm too heavy. Like, I can't sit up. Once that seat, I like under the G forces, I'm just stuck there. I'm like, you know, the woman's like, "You're gonna have to put your seat in the upright position." I'm like, "Tell it to the seat. I didn't choose this, you know." So at this point, I'm just laughing like I am now, and I'm having fun with it, and I'm brutalizing this lady beside me, and the rest of the plane is kind of taking my side because I'm a fairly funny guy to be around, so I'm making jokes, and I'm taking it about as lighthearted as I could take it, but it's a flat spectacle. It's just a whole spectacle in this plane, and finally get it sat up, and two or three more times because I would be holding my legs in as hard as I could to not hit that button, but eventually I would have to kind of relax, and then I would end up in this dude's lap, and it was a whole thing. But that's how flying was before, and it was miserable, and you had to definitely never use the bathroom because there was no way anything was happening in one of those little flight bathrooms on there. They're the size of a broom closet. Like, I wasn't fitting in there. So yeah,
So I guess international long haul wasn't an option.
not an option. Nope, not an option at all. So yeah, and now all of a sudden I'm flying into, Texas, into Austin, and it was the easiest flight. And not to mention that, before, to walk across an airport, well, good luck. Like, it would be an all day process. I would be, out of breath and having asthma attacks and everything hurting. It was just miserable. And now there I was all over Austin and going to Hack Your Health. I mean, just a whole new life. And I mean, it wasn't like it took 5 years or 10 years or whatever. It took 18 months. It took 18 months from them saying, "You're going to be stuck at home in a recliner, oxygen dependent at home, taking all these pills with congestive heart failure," to not being on any medication, having my license back, and being in an Airbnb with Carrie Mann and Sean Baker and Bella the Steak and Butter Gal, having a live stream in Austin 18 months later.
That's awesome. So to get to this point, like you got into the steak and butter gang, and you did some priming, but after that, I mean, how is your diet now, day to day?
Oh, I mean, honestly, my diet now is 90%, 99%. Well, it's lion diet plus eggs is what it is, and with like an occasional splur of bacon. And I'm just free from all. I have no, like, it's even beyond that. During this whole thing, I'd chewed Copenhagen for 26 years, nicotine. And let's see, it would have been October. So I was only 10 months into it. And my body said, "We don't want nicotine anymore." And I was like, I wasn't planning on quitting, but all of a sudden I didn't like the taste of chew anymore. And so after 26 years, I quit chewing. I was chewing 2 cans of Copenhagen long cut a day. I had such a nicotine addiction that I was falling asleep with it in my lip because I couldn't sleep good without having nicotine in my lip. And I quit that last October, not last October, a year ago last October. So it's been like a year and 3 months. I quit it cold turkey, and I haven't had a craving for it since. Not to mention, before that, in my younger days, I had a pretty bad gambling addiction that was always on my back. I'd quit, but it was always touch and go whether I was going to, fall back into that. And I had to be careful where I went, and it was always on my back. That completely melted away. Like, when I healed, and when your hormones heal, and when your signaling heals, that I think is where all the compulsion was coming from, and where that addictive personality was coming from. I think it was all hormones.
Yeah, it's almost like your body's just going, "Go and get me something. I need nutrition. Go and get it. Go and get it." And we just go, "I'm getting an impulse. I need to do something." And it's like gamble, drink, smoke.
Yeah. And now I don't seem to have that compulsive nature anymore. I seem to have way more patience. which is one of the reasons that carnivore works, is because, everybody says, you hear all this stuff now because I am in the steak and butter gang, and we do calls in there, and we try to help people a lot. And you start hearing the same things over and over. And one of the reasons why people think that 6 months on carnivore sounds like a long time or a year is because we all came from an entire life, you know, long battle with restrictive eating, trying to restrict calories, restrict nutrition. And we all know that when you're on a diet and you're restricting and you're starving, 6 months is an eternity, and you know that you have a breaking point. So we all come into every new way of eating and every new diet plan knowing that we have a breaking point. And that's what everybody's really asking. When they start asking really nervous questions like, how long does it take before you usually see results? Like, how long does it take before you lose X, Y, and Z amount of pounds? How long does it take before, you start seeing any improvements in whatever? What they're really saying is, can I get enough out of this before I break? Because they are fully planning on snapping.
Yeah, and it kind of doesn't work that way, right? It's just got to be a lifestyle thing because no matter what happens, how good your results are, whether it's over 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, if you go, okay, got my results, I'm going back now, all those results are gone in 2 months.
For sure. For sure. 100%. And the thing is that we only think that because we are used to a diet, a restrictive diet. When you're carnivore, you don't have to be hungry. In fact, you're getting nourished. You can eat through all of it and you'll be fine. Like, I don't care if you gain some weight at first. I don't care if you gain muscle and gain fat. Like, I personally, I think if you're doing lion or BBB and E, as long as you're not eating a bunch of cheese, I don't think you can even put fat on. I really don't. I don't think your body will put fat on. But even if you did, it's going to be very little and it's going to come off very quickly as soon as your body heals. So once your signaling's healed, and your body will self-regulate. That's why everybody's like, well, these carnivores are crazy because they say that calories don't mean anything. And it's like, well, of course, if you eat more molecules of food, you're going to put more molecules in your body and eventually you're going to gain some kind of size. But the reason why we don't care is because when they're carnivore molecules and healthy, proper human diet molecules, your signaling is going to get better and heal. And then you're going to self regulate, and you're not going to be able to actually eat that much. You're not going to be able to overdo it.
Yeah, so that's definitely the argument from the kind of carnivore haters out there. The other one is that I love is, yeah, you're doing okay now, but as soon as you go back to eating normally, that's all going to be reversed. And it's like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm not going back there.
But I know, and I hate that. That is the stupidest argument on the planet. It's like, name one diet that's also not true for. Name any calorie restrictive diet that if you stopped calorie restricting, you would go back to the previous you, for sure. For sure.
E Exactly, and it's like, yeah, your type 2 diabetes might look like it's gone now, but it's only in remission until you start eating the carbohydrates again, and it's like, yeah, my broken leg's also in remission until I go and stand in the middle of the highway again.
Exactly. 100%. And the one that I get all the time, which drives me insane, is this never-ending line of mental midgets keep commenting on my videos saying that, don't, like, congratulations, I'm glad that you're feeling better, but you need to know for sure that this is not the carnivore diet that did this for you. It's the fact that you're not overeating anymore and you're not eating all this junk. And I'm like, perfect. Like, I don't care. Great. Good. That, like, first of all, the idea that you think that I went from being 600 pounds when I was 14 to finding carnivore when I was 38 and didn't try any diets between here and there, you're out of your mind if you think that I just was clipping right along and then I said, hey, I'm going to try this carnivore thing. And my first diet just nailed it and just lost all this weight. It's like, no, that's not what happened. I tried all these diets, and I would agree with you that one of the major things that's happening here is that I'm not eating all the hyper palatable, addictive carbohydrate food. You are correct. But the reason why I'm able to not eat all that crap is because I'm satiated and because my hormones are healed and because my insulin resistance is healed.
These type of people don't like nuanced arguments, though, right? They're into just what face value of everything.
Well, you know why? Because they're addicts, right?
Right.
If what I'm doing is right, then that threatens their worldview, which means that they might have to cope with the fact that the things that they don't want to give up might actually be bad for them, and this way might be better. And if that was true, then they're going to have to face that they might have to give something up to be healthier, and that scares the heck out of them because they're addicted to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. So if you were giving someone advice about getting started with carnivore, what would you tell them to do to maximize their chances of success?
Keep it keep it simple. Eat your way through the cravings. Like your tools to get through carb addiction is you got to understand it doesn't matter how you got here, it doesn't matter where you're at. Your situation can absolutely get worse if you don't fix it, but it can also get exponentially better, like better, quicker, and to an extent that you couldn't even have believed until you experienced it yourself. And the way that you do that is that you eat through the cravings. Like the power of carnivore is that you do not have to be starving to death. You're already starving to death. I was 700 pounds and I was malnourished. That's why we go through those things. And the difference now is I have a nourished body that is healed and making good decisions, and my signaling is right. So eat through the cravings, and then you need to find a good community because you need to be with people that think like you. Because when you go out there in the world, the people around you are going to be a bunch of carb addicts. And those carb addicts, they don't want to have their worldview challenged. So they're going to tell you that the red meat is going to cause cholesterol problems and heart attacks, and that you're going to get butt cancer from whatever. Like they all say that crap all day long. But when you come into, to any of these carnivore communities, but I definitely an advocate for steak and butter gang. But if you go there, you'll see Limitless Lindy, who in 4 days is going to get her first skin surgery because she's lost 520 pounds on carnivore and got her life back. And she's going to get the skin cut off because she finally beat it. The carnivore did what gastric lap band surgery, bariatric surgery could not do. No calorie restricted diets do. And you get to talk to her. You can go in there and you can see countless people that were in walkers and couldn't walk before and that are walking again. There are countless people that have healed autoimmune conditions, and they are all having victories every day and healing up every day. I'm in there and I've lost 320 pounds, and you'll get to see me lose this next 150 pounds and get the skin off and see that this isn't an accident or a fluke or hype, And that's what those communities do for you, is that you get to be around people that are showing you that it's not impossible, because everybody out there is going to challenge that because they're still in that addictive world.
Yeah. Um, so Todd, how can people find you online? You've got the YouTube channel?
Yeah. Yeah. You can come check us out at, I'm the Carnivore Cure on YouTube and on Instagram, and I'm Carnivore Cure on X. And I'm also the Carnivore Cure on Rumble. So yeah, you can come check us out. And yeah, we'd love the support. I'm also in the Steak and Butter Gang. We do calls on, I do the open chat on the weekends, and I do a call called Iron Sharpens Iron, which is a men's mental health call. And yeah, we'd love to see you guys.
Awesome. I'll link to all those below. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story, Todd. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, appreciate it. It's my honor for sure. I've been watching your stuff for forever, Dave. Like I was telling you the other day on our live stream, that you have the archive that I always look up when when somebody says, "Has anybody ever seen any improvement in X, Y, or Z?" I'm like, if there is, Dave's got it. So I'm gonna go look at Dave's archives.